Hi, this is Chapter 1 of your AP text, Introducing American Government. So, how we're going to do this is that if there are any questions on the slides, I would like for you to answer them. Please write them down, type them on your iPad. I really don't care how you do it. But you need to answer the questions in order to be prepared to discuss them in class the next day. So, why should we care about politics? And why don't we care enough to vote? Now remember, please try to, make your answer somewhat thoughtful and thought-provoking so that we can have a discussion that might actually mean something. Okay, quote from Thomas Jefferson. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. So what do you think this quote means? And please, in your own words. Everything, of course, is always, always, always in your own words. Why does voter turnout matter? So why is it that people should actually go out to vote? Why does that indeed matter in this great nation that we live in today? Why are there a growing number of young people becoming more interested in politics now? You'll see that the pictures on the slide might give you a bit of a clue. If you know anything about the Occupy Wall Street movement that's currently going on, you can feel free to add that in, as that will make a good point for your conversation and discussion tomorrow. Okay, now we get into the meat of it all, government. So how should we be governed? In particular, how do you think we should be governed? Who holds power and who influences the policies adopted by government? And what should government do? And you can even phrase these in an ideal state. What do you think government should do? Now, according to your book, national governments should perform certain functions. Now, this isn't just our own national government. This has to do with national governments around the world. There are some basic provisions that each national government should provide. Maintain a national defense. Of course, that's probably one of the biggest ones because it's essential that we protect ourselves from foreign invasions or terrorists at this point. And it's also essential that we have a military in order to try and go and help other people in the world, whether they be in a time of war or a time of crisis such as a famine. We also, the government provides public goods, so you should figure out what a public good is and services. Those things can include taking care of roadways, taking care of national parks, making sure that we have clean air and clean water. Preserve order. Now, this is not just, from the threat of foreign invaders or terrorists. This is preserve order at home. So what do we do if somebody breaks the law? The fact that we even have laws in the first place. You have to have a set of punishments that go with those laws. So preserve order. Socialize the young, which is probably something that no one really thinks about, but we do this every single day. Every single morning you get up and you stand and you put your hand over your heart and you face a flag and you pledge allegiance to that flag. That is part of socialization. We learn patriotic songs and stories about early presidents, and we are taught from a very young age to be patriotic and to be proud to be an American. Lastly, collect taxes. Okay, no one ever likes to pay taxes. It's the dreaded thing, The only thing that's you can count on is in this life are death and taxes. Well, the government has to collect taxes, of course, because that's how they make money to operate the government. So if we didn't pay taxes, what would our government be like? Okay, so this is actually not in your book, but it's useful to know. So there are different forms of governments, and we actually still use Aristotle, the classical Greek philosopher, Aristotle's classification of government to describe those different forms of governments that are in practice today. So anarchy is obviously a lack of government, no government whatsoever. An autocracy, so rule by one. Now, this can be in many different forms. You can have an absolute monarchy, meaning that the monarch or the king or queen has absolute power over everything in that nation. You can have a constitutional monarchy, which is much like Great Britain became after the Magna Carta. So it's a limited monarchy. You still have a monarch, but that monarch has to abide by the Constitution. You can have a dictatorship, which means that there is, of course, one person who rules over all, and dictatorships are, generally speaking, never very nice. You can have an oligarchy, so rule by a few. So this can be an aristocracy, meaning a rule by the wealthy, or in a theocracy, which is basically ruled by religious groups. And lastly, you can have a democracy, which is ruled by the people. And there are two different forms of democracy. There's a direct democracy, which means that every single person participates directly in the government. And this was actually started in ancient Athens, and it works well in very small communities. However, it would not work today in our own nation because we simply have too many people to all participate actively in making laws and voting on those laws. So what we have is a representative democracy. That means that we elect our representatives and then they make the laws based upon how they think the people who voted them into office would like them to vote. Okay, so there is definitely a difference between the definition of government and the definition of politics. So that's something that you need to look up and make sure that you actually understand and know. A famous political scientist whose name was Laswell defined politics as who gets what, when, and how. So your task is to tell me what is the what, who is the who, and what does he mean by how. Then the policy-making system. Okay, first of all, public policy. Basically, it's a law. And this whole policy-making process begins and ends with the people. So the people, they voice a concern, an interest, a problem. And then if that concern has enough backing by enough people, it will go to a linkage institution. So please make sure you define linkage institution because we're going to come back to that. And then through the linkage institution, it gets put on the policy agenda. Now, it gets put on the policy agenda if it is deemed important enough to move forward, if there are enough people behind it, if it's a cause that is very dear and near to some linkage institution's heart, then it will get pushed forward. From there, it goes to a policy-making institution. Okay, there are roughly 3 big policy-making institutions, so you can figure out what those are. Come prepared, tell me tomorrow. And then through them, it becomes public policy, so a law. And then, of course, it goes back to the people because the people will have to abide by those laws, rules, or regulations. And then you can see how good or bad the law is once it's enacted by figuring out what the impact is on the people. Okay, so democracy. We know that we live in a democracy of sorts, but were the Founding Fathers comfortable with democracy? So why or why not? That's a pretty big question in terms of how our government was formed. So that's what you need to really think about and come prepared for discussion tomorrow. Another political scientist whose name is Dahl, he set up what he believed to be criteria for an ideal democracy. So this is considered to be kind of traditional democratic theory. He said that there should be equality in voting. That basically means 1 vote for every person. Everyone should be allowed to vote. Effective participation, so that we have to be kind of informed, and then we need to want to participate, right? And we need to have the means to do so, whether it be through voting or through taking polls or, writing your congresspeople. We need to have an enlightened understanding. So therefore, we need to have the freedoms to be able to go out and do all of those things that I mentioned in effective participation. Lastly, citizen control of the agenda. Basically, the people have to have a say in the government in terms of being able to control what gets put on that policy agenda, what kind of issues get brought forth. Remember, the policymaking process ends and begins with the people. So It's very important. And then lastly, inclusion. Okay, inclusion is kind of a tricky one because according to Dahl, he believes that everyone who is a resident of the nation should be able to vote and be a part of politics. But of course, that becomes problematic when you think about illegal aliens or even foreign residents who are here. Should they be allowed to vote even if they don't want to be a citizen? Should they still be allowed to vote even though they're living here, albeit temporarily? Okay, so theories of American democracy. There are various theories about how our government works. There's the pluralist theory, which basically is a very optimistic viewpoint of how our government works, because it says that because we have this multitude of groups out there, they're all competing to get their voices heard, and so they all kind of aid each other, in balancing power. And it is very optimistic. It is partially true. Does it always play out like that? Probably not. The next two theories are a bit more pessimistic than the pluralist one. Elite and class theory basically says that the wealthy people are in control of the government, and therefore they are the ones who make the decisions, and they're the real ones who have the power. And then you have hyperpluralism, which is the belief that there are way too many groups out there. And because we have so many groups competing for interests and a voice in the government, and because all of those groups fight with each other constantly and are in legal battles with each other, it means that there is what's called policy gridlock. So therefore, nothing gets done. It's like being stuck in traffic on 190 if there's an accident or something like that. You're getting nowhere fast. Bureaucratic theory is another theory which is actually not in your book, but it basically says that the bureaucracy, and if you don't know what that word means, look it up, because I'm going to ask you tomorrow. So the bureaucracy actually controls and holds the real power because they're the ones who carry out day-to-day functions of the government. Now, there are some challenges to democracy. First is technical expertise. Now, in order to be a lawmaker, right, you have to be knowledgeable about a multitude of things, because there are laws passed that are about everything under the sun, and then some of those laws require some real technical expertise. So, for example, if you're passing something, some environmental law, you really need to know the science behind the environmental law that you're going to pass. Otherwise, you don't know what's going on. So, you tell me, how is it that people in Congress today have the technical expertise to vote on the hundreds of bills that come up in the course of 1 year about so many different things, from food and drug approval to the environment, to foreign affairs, to the economy? How is it that they can know everything about those things? All right, second big challenge to democracy is limited participation. Basically, that means that in this country today, less than 50% of the voting age people actually vote. So what happens? Can you call this place a real democracy if less than 50% of the people actually take part in it? Are you really hearing about everyone's viewpoints? Okay, thirdly, escalating campaign costs. Okay. This is a real problem, in my opinion, because you have presidential campaigns that can cost in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay, and that's just for a presidential campaign per candidate. So wouldn't it be better maybe to have some caps on that, so that maybe that money could go to, getting us out of debt? Okay. Lastly, diverse political interests. And this is something that not even political scientists can actually agree upon. Some say that America is becoming more divided, especially on big issues, and then some say that America is actually becoming more centrist, meaning they're becoming more tolerant and more like middle of the road. So diversity can actually be a problem. Okay, so political culture. If we can't agree on some things, then what do we agree on, especially in terms of our government and democracy? Okay, so these are these age-old terms from our founding fathers, basically. You know, liberty. Give me liberty or give me death. It's basically give me the freedoms to be here, right? Give me all of those things outlined in the Bill of Rights. Give me freedom of speech, freedom of press, and don't violate my freedoms. Okay, egalitarianism, all men are created equal, right? Jefferson's famous quote. Individualism, okay, we may all be Americans, but we are all individuals. And that individuality is celebrated in the fact that we all have a voice, we all have a say in our government. Laissez-faire, fancy French term, which basically means keep the government out of economics. So it's capitalism, right? Private ownership of businesses, who can make a profit, and therefore the government should not interfere too much in that. And lastly is populism, and this is the one, especially in an election year, that all of the candidates pander to. It means that we are going to help the people. You know, you always hear about, helping the people on Main Street instead of Wall Street, or helping the little people. Well, that's what that's about. It's all about what can we do to help the ordinary people of America. So, given what I've just said in the past couple slides, do you think everyone then agrees about the current state of our nation and what is or isn't important to us? Okay, big versus small government. So, which one is better? Do you want a big government that can take care of everyone's needs, or do you want a government that basically runs in the background of things and kind of stays out of your life, right? So that's going to be a big heated discussion, no doubt. So, but write down all of the things that you can think of. Make like a pro and con list about what's good about big government, what's good about small government, what's bad about each, and we'll come back to it tomorrow. And then lastly, how big is our government? So actually, in this day and age, how big is our government today? And why do you think it's so very big? And you can use this chart right here to tell you exactly how much of our budget from 2011 goes to the various categories listed in here. Take a good look at it. Write down some notes. Write what you think about this. Tell me what you think about how our budget is divided up. All right, great. Hopefully you have all learned something, and hopefully when we get into class tomorrow, you will all be ready and prepared to have a very good discussion. Okay, good night. Thanks.